Welcome everyone, wherever you're watching this from. Before Tim speaks to us, we're going to just read from the passage he's going to be speaking to us on. It's Proverbs 6, and I'm going to read from verses 1 through to verse 19. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbour, and if you've shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you've been trapped by what you said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself. Since you have fallen into your neighbour's hands, go to the point of exhaustion and give your neighbour no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself, like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man, a troublemaker and a villain, who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with his eye, signals with his feet, and motions with his fingers, who plots evil with deceit in his heart. He always stirs up conflict. Therefore, disaster will overtake him in an instant. He will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. And may the Lord add his blessing to the reading.
Well, I don't know if you know somebody like this. I used to know when I was in secondary school, I knew a young lady, and she was extremely popular. She was extremely well known, and she did all the things that she attempted to do. She was successful at. She was at the top of her class. She was most likely to succeed in our minds. And then we graduated. I went to university, and then some years later, I was in a conversation with other people who had also gone to that same school as I had. And I come to find out that she started a drug habit. She quit university, and then eventually she ended up in jail. And what a shock that was. This person, how did that happen? So how did that happen? Well, it's not always the case that it has to do with what I think I'm going to go on to talk about. Sometimes people come from difficult situations. Sometimes people have diseases that can't be overcome. Sometimes people have just been given a bad lot in life, as it were. The family situation's not good. But other times, how does somebody go from having so much potential to just wasting it all? Other times it's not an external factor at all. It's something that happens to them through idleness. During the times of idleness in their life, they fall into trouble, and it leads them down a path that they don't want to go. And so the obvious illustration that we can think of when we think of the Bible is we think of King David. King David, the man after God's own heart. What happens? Well, there's this one season of his life where he doesn't want to go and fight the battles to protect his kingdom. And so he sends other people to go, and he sits on his couch for a number of days. And one day, out of boredom, he goes upstairs to look outside, and there he sees his neighbor's wife bathing. And so then there's lying and adultery and murder. You can read all about it in 2 Samuel. In any regard, lying, adultery, and murder. It wrecks his life. Those things are bad. We shouldn't do those things. But it all starts with this lazy and idling behavior when one ought to be doing something else, when one ought to be faithfully working. And so the Bible has a lot to say about the dangers of idleness. And that's what we have here before in the passage that we're looking at today. And Solomon's advice to us, and Solomon is David's son, Solomon's advice to us is be vigilant in work, get going, keep going. It will keep you from all sorts of bad things, all sorts of problems. Be vigilant in work, get going, keep going. It will keep you from all sorts of problems. So let's start with this. Let's start with get going, get going. Be vigilant in your work, primarily get going. This is going to be chapter 6 and verse 1. My son, if you put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands in a pledge for a stranger, you've been trapped by what you've said, ensnared by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, to free yourself. Since you've fallen into your neighbor's hands, go to the point of exhaustion. Give your neighbor no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of a fowler. So I would imagine that most of us don't know what it means to put up our security for our neighbor. To put up security for our neighbor. To put this into modern terms, that's like gambling it all or a get-rich-quick scheme. That's the modern equivalent. And so just the other day, actually, I was on Google News, and there I clicked on something that took me to Richard Branson. And what Richard Branson was saying is, look, I made this amazing software, and if you just buy my stock and buy my software, it's just going to go up exponentially. You don't have to do any work at all. It will just trade. It'll trade Bitcoin, and you'll have tons of money. Buy my stock. Buy it right now, right? And in order to prove this, there was actually a lady who says, I bought you some stock, and let's see how it's gone up. And it's gone up, right? And everybody wants to buy this. Listen, people ruin their lives on things like this. In the UK, we've got a bit of a gambling problem. I don't know if you've noticed this. Some people, they go and they spend whatever, 20, 40 quid, and they have a good time, and it's all right. But many waste all of their life savings hoping to hit it big. And so here in the text, we have a foreigner. That is somebody that is not a close friend. He's a neighbor. That means he lives somewhere in your city. And this person has talked their friend into undersigning a loan for them. Now, just the fact that you have to undersign the loan means they're not qualified to get the loan. This is a sketchy endeavor. This is something that you should think twice about doing in the bank's estimation. So this is a bad situation. Well, how is this about laziness, you ask? Well, sometimes we want money. We want it to instantly come to our pockets, and we don't want to work for it. And so we go and we invest. We invest in things we ought not to invest in, hoping that we won't have to do anything and that we'll get a bunch of money at the end of it. And so Solomon says this is a very, very bad idea. You could lose it all. He could lose his house. He could lose all his possessions because he's undersigned this loan. And so his advice to us is the word that occurs in our passage a lot, and a key theme. It's the word go. Go. That is, stop doing nothing. Take action. Take action. Get to work. Verse 6 of the same passage, it says, go to the ant, lazy person. Go to the ant, slugger. Okay, and then also here it says, don't give any sleep to your eyes and don't give any slumber to your eyelids until you've taken care of this. And if you look at verse 9 and 10, talking about the lazy person, Solomon says, how long, O lazy person, are you going to go on sleeping and slumbering? The very same words. And so this first example of not putting up security for your neighbor, that's really giving us an example of laziness. I just hope that all I have to do is sign a piece of paper and money will come to me, and then I won't have to work. That's what's going on. It's an example of what being lazy is like. And Solomon says, have nothing to do with that. Rather, you ought to work hard. Work hard, and then you'll have your fill. And so he says, here's what you should do. He tells them, go and humiliate yourself, embarrass yourself trying to get out of this bad loan. And as you do this, you just keep persistent with the person who made you co-sign until eventually they get so irritated, they say, fine, you're off the lease. You're off the lease. You don't have to pay, which could happen in that society, whereas in our society, it may not be the same. Nevertheless, the principle remains, don't be lazy. Don't think that money is going to come out of nowhere. Don't go gamble at all. These are bad things. And when it talks about humiliating yourself, going to your neighbor, it's really talking about that idea of repenting of the notion that we should just get money for doing nothing. That we should just have money because, it should just come to our pockets. No, says Solomon, you work. God has given you work. Go and do your work. And then you will be rewarded for that, and it will be good. This is what God intends for us. In the past, and maybe even in the present, I'll have fantasies of winning the lotto. I don't know if anybody here plays lotto. I'll have these fantasies. Now, I don't play lotto, so there's no way I'm going to win. And yet I would still imagine all of that money coming from me, for nothing. I haven't done anything. I just win it all, and all the satisfaction that brings me. And you no longer need to work. You can work if you want to, but you don't need to. Listen, those are not God's ways. God's ways is that you work at it with all of your heart. You do the thing that he's given you to do with a glad heart, knowing that this is the means that he's given you to provide for your family. Be vigilant in work. So get going. Get going. Some of you need to get going this morning. Keep going. Keep going. We see this in verse 6. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and its wisdom. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provision in the summer. It gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed robber or man. An armed man. So there's this hilarious comparison going on. God is saying to the lazy person, it would be better if you were more like this bug down here. It's kind of a humiliating moment. Be like the bug. So the lazy person more and more lacks, and the ant more and more has what the ant needs. Now, during COVID restrictions, a lot of people have been working at home. I've been working at home for quite a bit of it. And for those who are working at home, a lot of the companies have been kind of suspicious. Are you really putting in the time? And so they've invested in spying on their workers to make sure they're actually working. And we do that because we kind of understand that it's natural for human beings to kind of default to laziness and idleness. But look here. The ant has none of those checks and balances. There's no employer, there's no supervisor, and yet they work tirelessly and continually as if part of their purpose is to do this, is to work. It's to work. Be like an ant. And so they do it all through the summer. And then when the harvest does it, they keep it up. They keep going. They're always and continually doing what they were made to do. And so one would have to imagine that their mindset is, this is what I was made to do, and I will do it. I will enjoy it. I will celebrate it, and I will go about it. And that this mindset should be inherent in us too. The ant inherently values work, and so should we. Now, listen, there's an important caveat. The ant doesn't work all the time. There's actually two important caveats. The ant doesn't work all the time. It doesn't work during the night. It doesn't work during the winter, the rainy years in Israel. It would just sit tight in the ant hill. And so it takes a Sabbath, and we need to take Sabbaths. We need to take time off, but we're to work. When we're working, we're to be all in it. We're to be all in it. Another caveat is some of us cannot work because we have physical ailments or other conditions that would not allow us to work, and that's totally all right. You only use what you have. And so if you can work, then you ought to work. And if you can't work, then you ought to find something good that the Lord wants you to do, and do that with all of your heart. Now, I don't know about you, if you've ever had a new job or an exciting job, and you show up, and those first weeks in, you are just working and enjoying it and saying, oh, isn't this thrilling and whatnot. But then as time goes on, the cracks of that job start to appear. The employer that you don't like, those tasks that don't seem fun to you. We'll get into that because maybe we can change some of that. It doesn't seem fun to you. You don't like this and you don't like that. And pretty soon you're putting in half effort. And God says, no, be like an ant. And what that means primarily is keep going in your work and enjoy your work. Keep enjoying your work. Keep putting in your very best effort. And so many of us need to hear that this morning. Keep going in your work. Now, you can go and find a different place to work, but wherever you choose to go to work, maybe you really truly work at a terrible, awful place and you should put that away. But wherever you actually choose to work, go at it with all of your heart. Famous quote, if not now, when? Right? If you have the power to do the thing now. And that leads into the lazy, right? Because we get a picture of what the lazy person thinks. And the lazy person just wants a bit more pleasure, a bit more relaxing, a bit more being at ease, a bit more sleep, a bit more slumber, a bit more folding of the hands to go to sleep. I don't really fold my hands when I go to sleep. I'm not sure precisely what that means, but apparently this is part of the procedure of just being ready to chill out, as it were. Now, listen, when I was in university, I was very lazy and I was all about relaxing, and I had kind of a difficult time in university. And so when I got to graduate school, I said, I'm going to do things differently. And here's what I did. No matter whether there was a test that week or if the test was well off into the future, no matter if there was a paper due that week or that month, or if it was well off in the future, I would just do study every single day. I'd put in a couple hours every single day. I'd work. If there was a paper that had to be done eventually, I would do a little bit of that paper every single day. And what happened is I had friends of mine who were like, oh, it's early in the year. Let's just go have fun. Don't take it so seriously. And they would go out and have fun, as it were. And then what would happen is later on in the semester, their lives would descend into the pit as they tried to stuff months and months of studying into just minutes. And so that's what happens here for this lazy person. They put off and procrastinate on the thing that they don't want to do so they can relax and enjoy. And eventually it piles up and they're in need and they're in want. Since they wouldn't go to work, what comes to them? Trouble. And so today is a good day to continue working and to work with all of your heart. Get going. Keep going. Now, lastly, it's going to keep you from all sorts of trouble. It's going to keep you from all sorts of trouble. We see this in verse 12. A troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with his eyes, singles with his feet, motions with his fingers, who plots evil with deceit in his heart, he always stirs up conflict. Therefore, disaster will overtake him in an instant. He'll be suddenly destroyed without remedy. Or he'll suddenly be destroyed without remedy. So does this portion of the passage actually talk about laziness, or now are we changing topics and talking about wicked people? I think it relates to laziness still. Why do I say that? Well, the word for troublemaker here is good for nothing. Good for nothing. Not that the person has no value, but the person is not good at getting anything at all whatsoever done. Okay? It's actually a person who is consistently and completely lazy. They're good for no good thing that needs to be done. They will not work. And so we're still talking about that topic of someone who is perpetually lazy now, completely lazy. And what we see is that in the vacuum of their laziness, the work that they aren't doing, they find other things to do. And the other things they find to do are bad, are evil, not something we want to do. And so that first sentence, we could actually translate, a good-for-nothing person practices wickedness. Or a lazy person is going to be drawn to lazy evil, lazy evil. And so actually this is in the Bible. If you think about Jesus shared the story of the talents. And in that story, he said that there were 3 men, there was an overseer, and the overseer said, I'm going to go on a big trip. Here's some money. I want you guys to invest. And then he leaves. He leaves them, and they all have choices about what they want to do. And the first 2 invest, and the third one says, I think I'll sit on the beach, and I'll take that money, and I'll bury it in the earth. And that's what he does. He goes and he has a nice siesta while the master is away. He buries it. Now, at the end of that, he digs it up, and he brings it to the master, and he says, look, you have what is yours. And the master's response, and the master is Jesus, the master says, you wicked and lazy servant. You wicked and lazy servant. He's saying a good-for-nothing person is practicing wickedness. They go hand in hand. Laziness is kind of like the bedrock for all sorts of bad things that could form out of this. And so this description here in verses 12 through 15, they're all about behaviors, but they're behaviors that have little or no action. And so we have squinting with the eyes, shuffling with the feet, coming up with plots, and our hearts are filled with wickedness, and then stirring up the community. Actually, that word stirring might imply some sort of action, but the word actually in the Hebrew is you send out. You're sending out division and strife. And so you're not even willing to do the work yourself. You send somebody else to do it. And so the picture here is of somebody who's doing things. Perhaps they are working quite a bit, very hard now, but not to do the things that God has given them to do, the good thing that would support themselves, that they're now going to do through subterfuge and through lying and through deceit. They're going to take what isn't theirs. It's a shifty lifestyle. They won't work. They still must get their needs met. And so they're going to do so through evil and illegal means. And so actually, it's a kind of a funny thing. Some criminals are actually quite smart, and they actually even work hard in one sense. And you might just ask them, hey, look, you seem pretty smart. Why not just work for a living and you'll feel better about it? They won't work, though. And so some criminals, they do work hard mentally. And we understand this, right? If you decide to skive off from work, you're not going to go to work, right? And you've used your personal days. You have to come up with a lie. You have to come up with a lie about what's going on. Instead of you just going and having a nice time, you tell them that you were sick. Or perhaps in a business, you're working in a business now, but the competitors are working hard too, and you want to do a great job. And suddenly you realize, I don't have to do a great job. I can just break the law. I can just go over this rule or that rule. I can skip this, and then I'll have the advantage, and I won't have to work for it. And so we understand what's going on here. But look, it doesn't come to anything. It doesn't come to anything because God doesn't allow it to. Their disaster comes suddenly. And for all the crooks in the world that decide they don't want to work and they do want to steal, we're getting better at just catching them instantly in it. The disaster strikes suddenly. They're shattered. Now, look, the evil ends up taking over the life of the lazy person and define it. And we see this lastly in verse 16. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. If you look at that list there, you'll notice the last thing, which is the most important, the most offensive to God out of that list, is a person who stirs up conflict in the community. And if you look at the verse 15, talking about the good for nothing person, the extraordinary lazy person, it says there, he's always stirring up conflict. The exact same words. We're talking about a person who is so wicked, they've just covered their life. They're so lazy, they've covered their life with wickedness. This is where it can go. And so what we have here is someone who head to toe is just preoccupied now with sin. Okay. And so that's what we see here. It says they're with their eyes and with their tongue and with their heart and with their feet, their whole body is engaged in doing what is displeasurable to God and what God asked them not to do. And so if they will not do the work that God has put before them, what will they do? Everything that God abominates, everything that God is bothered by. And recently, BBC's Panorama, they did an expose on bank fraud in the UK. And during this expose, they mentioned that there are many Russian oligarchs. They changed their names and they use the money in the system. And this is a terrible thing. And they start to kind of talk about these oligarchs. And these oligarchs, they are doing all of the things that we find here that God hates. Just all of those things that God is disliking. They do. They're a perfect picture of laziness because they will not work as others work for having a nice and easy living. Instead, they go and you could just read that list off and it's just great. Haughty eyes, lying tongues, hands that shed innocent blood, hearts that devise wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness, liars who pour out lies, and they stir up the community. They hurt people. And God is disgusted. And so the idea is don't go down that trail. Don't start being idle when you should be working. Keep in your working. Don't go down that trail because this is where it leads. It's a slippery slope. So be vigilant in work. Get going. Keep going. It will help you avoid all sorts of trouble. Now, I'm excited to talk about during our breakout sessions how we might apply this message that we've learned today. For the moment, I just want to give you one thought. And here's the thought. We are Christians, and what that means as Christians, because Christ has died for us and he's sanctified us, it means that we can go to work and be an amazing example of people who will receive the lot that God has given them in life and enjoy it and show that they're enjoying it and be an outstanding model to our community. Christians should be amazing workers because they've been redeemed. And because life, they're not trying to get every inch out of life. They know that the life coming is really wonderful. And so they take what God has given them. How can you enjoy your work? Well, I have down here, be an ant. Be an ant. And what that means is you look at your work and you don't say, this is something terrible that I have to do because, well, this is such as life. You look at your work and you say, this is what part of what I was created and part of what I'm supposed to be doing on this earth. And I'm going to enjoy doing that. And so actually, I was thinking about this. So we think of work as not fun. That's the way we define it. It's not fun. It's not fun. But what is fun? Fun is watching the football game. Fun is playing video games. Fun is, I don't know how many hours I spent wasted on video games. I think in my life, I've had both laziness on one hand and overworking on the other. So I need my Sabbath rest, but I also not to be lazy. I wasted so much time on video games. Well, why is it that work isn't fun like video games are fun? When you get down to it, the answer is because that's what we tell ourselves. But you were made for this. And if you'll tell yourself, actually, this is fun. This is what I was meant to do. And I will do it with all of my heart. That's really going to change things for you. Let's take a moment out and pray